The aroma of aged paper and beeswax from the library clung to the air, a stark contrast to the sharp, metallic taste of fear in my mouth. Spring had arrived unseasonably early this year, yet a persistent chill seemed to linger within the stone walls of our manor. My fingers, slick with nervous sweat, fumbled with the buttons of my formal tunic as I watched my reflection in the polished mirror grow indistinct. Tonight was the concordance, the evening when eligible sons from the noble houses were to be presented to the werewolf monarchy. This tradition, as ancient as the truce between our two peoples, had allowed humans and werewolves to coexist in a fragile alliance for generations, with marriages often cementing political compacts. This year, the concordance served a singular urgent purpose. The Alpha Queen required a husband. My stepbrother Adrian was meant to be presented this evening. Adrian, handsome and poised, with his flawlessly executed bows and his deep knowledge of royal etiquette. But 4 days ago a sudden, violent fever had struck him, leaving him confined to his bed, weak and delirious. My stepfather had been a phantom in the halls ever since, his whispers filled with anxious talk of promises made to the council, of debts that demanded payment, and of the dire repercussions our family would face if we failed to offer a son. Julian? The door creaked open without the courtesy of a knock, framing my stepfather's imposing figure. In the 7 years since my own father's death, I had never detected a note of warmth in his voice when he addressed me. "Straighten your shoulders. Let me see you." I rose from the stool, attempting to smooth the dark silk of the tunic that had been hastily altered to fit my slender frame. It was originally intended for Adrian, who was broader and more muscular. On me, the fabric draped awkwardly, emphasizing my lean build and scholarly pallor. "You will have to suffice," he declared, circling me as a wolf might inspect its kill. "Recall my instructions. You are to accept any offer that is made. Your father left this family with nothing but liabilities and a tarnished reputation. This is your chance to be of some use." The small silver pocket watch that had belonged to my father, my sole inheritance, felt heavy in my waistcoat. I touched it instinctively, the cool metal a familiar comfort, remembering my father's words before he passed. "Sometimes the greatest freedom is found in choosing your own path, no matter how narrow it seems." "But the Alpha Queen," I started, "is immensely wealthy and rules the largest territory in the region." He cut me off with a sharp gesture. "And she needs a human husband to uphold the alliance. Yes, she is paralyzed from that attempt on her life last year. Yes, the rumors say she has grown cruel and embittered, but you will perform your duty to this family." His fingers clamped down on my shoulders. "You will spare your stepbrother this burden. After all we have done for you, it is the very least you can do." What he truly meant was, "after we have tolerated you." I was the unwanted evidence of my father's first marriage, the quiet, bookish boy who preferred the company of the library to that of the nobility, who possessed none of the social graces so carefully cultivated in Adrian. "The carriage departs in half an hour," my stepfather said, already dismissing me as he turned to leave. "Do not bring shame upon us." When the door shut, I sank back onto the stool, wrestling with the impulse to escape into the forest surrounding our estate. But to what end? At 19, with no fortune and no allies, my choices were non-existent. And beneath the fear there was another feeling, a desperate, foolish hope that I might, against all odds, find a place where I truly belonged. I had never laid eyes on the Alpha Queen. Few humans had since the attack that had confined her to the royal palace. The rumors were rampant. She was horribly scarred. She was more beast than woman now. She had killed servants for minor infractions with a single swipe of her claws. The only undisputed fact was that at 34 she remained without a consort, and the werewolf council's concern over the line of succession was growing. As our carriage rumbled through the darkening landscape toward the capital, I gazed out at the passing trees, their new spring leaves like silver coins in the moonlight. My stepfather sat across from me, his lips moving silently as he reviewed the proper protocols. Beside him, my younger stepbrother Leo, only 15, watched everything with a wide-eyed mix of trepidation and fascination. "Remember," my stepfather hissed as the royal palace loomed into view, its towering stone battlements and glowing windows both awe-inspiring and menacing. "You are a stand-in for Adrian. Speak as little as you can. Your appearance is—" He paused, searching for a suitable word. unassuming enough that you may go unnoticed. With any luck, a lower-ranking alpha might see you as a suitable political match. Just do not embarrass this family." The palace courtyard was a chaotic swirl of carriages and elegantly dressed nobles, both human and werewolf. I could always distinguish them. The werewolves moved with a predatory grace that no human could replicate, their eyes catching the light in unsettling ways, their very presence demanding an instinctive respect. A servant with a face of carved stone led us through echoing corridors to a vast ballroom where dozens of young men in jewel-toned attire stood with their families, nervously awaiting the inspection. My stepfather guided me forward to join them, then melted back into the designated area for family members with Leo. I stood alone, feeling utterly exposed, the hastily altered tunic gaping slightly at my back. I tried to regulate my breathing, concentrating on the intricate mosaic of the floor instead of the assessing gazes of the werewolf nobility who prowled the room. "Head up," a young man beside me whispered. "They can smell fear." Before I could reply, a hush fell over the hall. The massive doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open, and a contingent of royal guards entered, their black and silver uniforms crisp and immaculate, their expressions impassive. And then she appeared. The Alpha Queen, seated in a wheeled chair of polished silver and dark wood, did not look like a woman broken by tragedy. She radiated such an aura of raw power that every person in the room, human and werewolf alike, instinctively averted their gaze. Except for me. Something inside me refused to look away, even as I felt the crushing weight of my own audacity. She was beautiful, but in the way a storm is beautiful, all sharp lines and deadly elegance. Dark hair was plaited back from a face that seemed sculpted from alabaster, pale and flawless, save for a single thin scar that traced a path from her right temple to her jaw. Her shoulders were impossibly broad beneath her formal black attire, and her hands, resting on the wheels of her chair, were both strong and graceful. But it was her eyes that held me captive. They were the color of Arctic ice, so cold they seemed to burn. Those eyes swept across the room slowly, dismissively, until they met mine. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Some primitive part of my being recognized the immense danger in that gaze, yet I was ensnared, like a fawn caught in a hunter's sights. Her expression remained unchanged, but I saw something flicker in the depths of those frozen eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. The ceremony commenced, each young man being formally presented. I barely registered the droning announcements, my entire consciousness focused on the pressure of that glacial gaze, which returned to me again and again. When it was my turn, my stepfather stepped forward to announce me as Julian Blackwell, son of the House of Blackwell, conveniently neglecting to mention that I was merely a stepson, a substitute for his true heir. I bowed as I had been taught, my movements stiff and awkward on the unfamiliar polished floor. A wave of barely stifled amusement rippled through the attendees, and a hot flush crept up my neck. But when I straightened, the Alpha Queen was still watching me, her head tilted slightly as if I were an enigma she was trying to solve. The selection process was brutally swift. After the presentations, royal advisors moved through the crowd, tapping certain young men on the shoulder and directing them to one side of the room, the ones deemed worthy of consideration. One by one, they were led away, presumably to be introduced to various unmated alphas seeking consorts. My stepfather's eyes burned with disapproval as I remained untapped, standing awkwardly among the dwindling group of rejected candidates. Then a tall, silver-haired advisor approached me. He did not tap my shoulder, but instead gave a slight bow, a gesture of respect typically reserved for high-ranking individuals. "The Alpha Queen requests your presence," he said, his voice carrying just enough to turn heads throughout the ballroom. "Please follow me." A torrent of shocked whispers erupted around us. My stepfather's jaw dropped in astonishment, while Leo clutched his arm, his eyes wide. I felt a wave of dizziness, unsure if this was a stroke of luck or a catastrophe in the making. Following the advisor on trembling legs, I was led not to a small antechamber like the other selected men, but through a private door behind the royal dais. We walked in silence through corridors that grew progressively quieter and more opulent, until we reached a set of massive doors guarded by two stern-faced she-wolves in human form. They nodded to the advisor and swung the doors open without a word. "Wait here," the advisor instructed, gesturing me inside. "She will join you shortly." The door closed behind me with the heavy finality of a vault being sealed. I found myself in what appeared to be a private study. The walls were lined with books, a massive desk stood before a window overlooking the palace gardens, and the air was filled with the scents of leather and pine. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the rich carpets. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was certain any werewolf within a mile radius could hear it. Why had she singled me out? Was this some cruel jest, a way to humiliate the boy who didn't belong? Or worse, had she somehow seen through our deception? The door opened silently behind me, and I knew without turning that she had entered. The very atmosphere of the room seemed to shift, charged with a strange electricity that made the fine hairs on my arms stand on end. "You may look at me," came her voice, deep and smooth as aged whiskey, yet with an edge that hinted at carefully leashed power. "Most humans cannot bring themselves to do so, yet you seemed incapable of looking away." I turned slowly and found her closer than I had anticipated. In the intimate confines of the study, the force of her presence was even more potent. Up close, I could see that her eyes were not just blue, but held flecks of silver that seemed to glow in the firelight. "Tell me," she said, wheeling herself closer, "why the son of the House of Blackwell smells of library dust and old paper rather than expensive colognes? Why he stands as if he is trying to vanish, rather than as a noble son schooled since birth in courtly bearing? And why," her eyes narrowed dangerously, "he wears a tunic hastily altered for a frame it was never meant for?" My breath caught in my throat. She knew, of course she knew. Werewolves possessed senses that humans could only imagine. "I am not Adrian," I whispered, the truth tumbling out before I could check it. "My stepbrother is ill. I was sent in his stead. I am Julian, the unwanted stepson, the replacement." I braced myself for her anger, for some form of punishment. Instead she laughed, a harsh, rough sound, as if from disuse. At last, someone who does not reek of ambition and deceit. She moved closer still, so close I could see the fine silver threads in her black jacket, so close I could feel the heat radiating from her body. "Do you know who I am, Julian the replacement?" "The Alpha Queen," I answered, my voice barely a whisper. "Seraphina," she corrected. "Ruler of werewolves and men, now reduced to interviewing vapid young lords, because my council fears I will die without an heir." Her mouth twisted in a bitter smile. "And now it seems they have sent me a pale substitute." The words stung more than they should have. I was used to being dismissed, to being found lacking, but something inside me, perhaps the same something that had held her gaze when others had looked away, rose up in protest. "I am not a substitute," I said, lifting my chin. "I am just not who you anticipated." Her eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch, the only sign of surprise on her otherwise controlled face. For a long moment she simply studied me, as if attempting to peer through my skin to the thoughts beneath. I fought the urge to squirm under that penetrating gaze. Finally she smiled, a small, dangerous curve of her lips that held no warmth. "No," she murmured, "you are not what anyone anticipated." She wheeled back slightly, putting some distance between us. "Tell me, Julian the unanticipated, what would you do if I were to choose you as my consort? Would you run screaming from the monster in the chair?" The question hung in the air between us, laden with implications I couldn't fully grasp. The monster in the chair. Was that how she saw herself, this woman who commanded fear and respect with a single glance? I touched my father's watch, its familiar weight giving me courage. "I do not see a monster," I said softly. "I see a woman who has been wounded." A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps disbelief, crossed her icy blue eyes. She wheeled closer again, her movements fluid despite the chair. "You know nothing of me." "I know you were attacked," I said. "I know you lost the use of your legs. I know the rumors say you have become cruel." I paused, gathering my courage. "But I also know that rumors are seldom the whole truth." She studied me, her head tilted slightly. "And what of the rumors about you, Julian?" "They say the first Lord Blackwell's son is peculiar, that he prefers books to people, that he spends more time with the staff than with the nobility." Her lips curved into that not-quite smile again. "They say he is plain and awkward and utterly unsuited for marriage." A flush of heat rose to my cheeks. "Then perhaps we are well matched in our unsuitability." I regretted the words as soon as they left my mouth. Had I just suggested that I, plain, unwanted Julian, could be a match for the Alpha Queen? But to my surprise, Serafina threw back her head and laughed, a genuine sound this time, rough but real. "You are either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish," she said, a hint of amusement lingering in her voice. "Most people would not dare to speak to me with such candor." "Perhaps they should," I replied before I could stop myself. "Perhaps you need someone who sees you, not just your crown or your chair." The amusement vanished from her face, replaced by an intensity that made me want to retreat. But I held my ground as she moved closer, so close I could see the individual silver flecks in her blue irises, so close I could catch her scent. Pine and smoke and something wild that made my pulse race. "And do you see me, Julian?" she asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Or do you see a convenient escape from your stepfather's house?" The question struck a little too close to the truth I had been avoiding. Yes, a part of me saw a potential escape in this bizarre situation, a chance to leave a home where I had never truly belonged, but there was something else as well, a strange, compelling pull toward this woman that defied all logic. "Both," I admitted, honesty forcing the word from me. "I will not pretend I am not desperate to escape my stepfather. But I believe there is more to you than what others see, just as there is more to me." She leaned back in her chair, regarding me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "Interesting," she murmured, almost to herself. Then her tone shifted, becoming brisk and regal again. "You may go. Tell no one of this conversation." Dismissed so abruptly, I could only bow awkwardly and turn to leave, my mind swirling with confusion. Had I failed some test? Said too much? As I reached the door, her voice stopped me. "Julian." I turned back, my hand on the ornate handle. "The concordance concludes tomorrow evening with a formal announcement of the chosen consorts," she said, her expression unreadable. "You would be wise to prepare yourself for the possibility of change." With those cryptic words echoing in my ears, I was escorted back to the ballroom, where my stepfather waited, his face a mask of barely suppressed curiosity. "What happened?" "What did she say to you?" he hissed, pulling me aside. "She asked about our family," I said, the partial truth easier than trying to explain the strange, intense conversation we had shared. "She made no promises." My stepfather's lips thinned into a hard line. "Well, we must not get our hopes up. Come, we are returning to the manor. There are other alphas who might still express an interest." During the carriage ride home, my stepfather alternated between dismissing the possibility of a royal match and scheming about how to exploit it. Leo watched me with wide, curious eyes, as if I might suddenly transform into something extraordinary simply because the Alpha Queen had spoken to me. I remained silent, replaying every moment of my encounter with Serafina, trying to decipher what had transpired between us. That night sleep eluded me. I stood by my window, watching the moonlight silver the landscape, feeling as though I were poised on the edge of a cliff. Tomorrow everything could change, or nothing would change at all, and I would remain trapped in this half-life, neither a true son nor a servant, belonging nowhere. "What should I do, father?" I whispered, clutching the watch in my pocket. No answer came, of course, only the sigh of the wind through the trees and the distant howl of a wolf. Morning brought chaos to the manor. A royal messenger arrived before the breakfast bell, delivering an ornate invitation addressed specifically to me, requesting my immediate presence at the palace. My stepfather nearly choked on his tea, then sprang into action, ordering the servants to prepare my best clothes, which were not very fine at all. "We must have you looking presentable," he fretted, rummaging through Adrian's wardrobe. "Thank goodness you're both of a similar build at least." Within an hour I was dressed in Adrian's second-best suit, a dark green velvet that had been hastily pinned to fit my leaner frame, my hair slicked back in a style that felt stiff and unnatural. My stepfather's last-minute instructions echoed in my ears as the royal carriage carried me back toward the palace. "Remember your manners. Speak only when you are spoken to. Do not mention Adrian's illness. If she offers for you, accept without hesitation." The palace seemed different by day, no less imposing, but bustling with activity rather than wrapped in ceremonial gravity. I was led not to the formal chambers I had seen the night before, but through corridors where servants hurried about their tasks, casting curious glances in my direction. We arrived at a sunlit chamber that overlooked a private garden. Waiting inside was not the Alpha Queen, but a distinguished older man with silver-streaked dark hair and the same piercing blue eyes I had stared into the previous evening. "Lord Julian," he said, his voice cultured and cool. "I am Lord Valerius, the Queen's father. Please, sit." I sank into a chair across from him, trying to maintain the posture my stepfather had drilled into me. Lord Valerius observed me with a frankness that was very much like his daughter's, making no attempt to hide his assessment. "You are not what I expected," he said at last. "I am told that often, my lord," I replied, which earned me a slight raise of his eyebrows. "Yes, I imagine you are." He leaned forward slightly. "My daughter has expressed an interest in you. This is unprecedented." I was not sure how to respond, so I remained silent, waiting. "Serafina has rejected every candidate presented to her since the attack," he continued. "She has made no secret of her disdain for this entire process. And yet here you are, a young man with no notable connections, no great fortune, no particular reputation for charm or prowess." His gaze sharpened. "Why you?" The question did not feel cruel, merely direct. I found I appreciated his honesty, even as it underscored my own perceived shortcomings. "I do not know," I admitted. "Perhaps because I want nothing from her except to understand." Lord Valerius tilted his head, studying me as if I were a curious new species of insect. An unusual answer from an unusual young man. He tapped his fingers on the arm of his chair. "You are aware, of course, that she cannot bear children naturally, given her condition. Heirs would have to be conceived through magical means. The process is not always successful." A warmth crept up my neck at the frank discussion of such a private matter. "I had not considered that aspect," I said honestly. "No?" His eyebrow arched in skepticism. "Most young men dream of little else, to father the next Alpha King. I have never been like most young men," I said. A faint smile touched his lips. "Indeed." He rose with a fluid grace, moving to a sideboard where he poured 2 glasses of wine. "My daughter is not an easy woman, Julian. Even before the attack she was intense, demanding, and often solitary. Now," he handed me a delicate crystal glass, "now she carries wounds that go far deeper than her physical ones." I accepted the wine, inhaling its rich aroma. "You are warning me away from her." "I am preparing you," he corrected. "If she chooses you, and I believe she will, your life will never again be your own. You will be watched constantly, judged endlessly, and expected to navigate a court filled with wolves who will view your humanity as a weakness." "And how do you see it?" I asked. He smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed his severe features. "Potentially as her salvation." He took a sip of wine, watching me over the rim of his glass. "You do not fear her, do you?" I considered the question carefully. "I fear what she is capable of," I answered truthfully, "but I do not fear who she is." "An interesting distinction." Lord Valerius set down his glass. "Well, Julian Blackwell, I believe we will be seeing much more of each other. The Queen requests your presence in the royal gardens in 1 hour. I will have a valet help you prepare." The valet turned out to be a quiet werewolf man, who introduced himself as Marcus. His movements were swift and precise as he helped me change into a simpler but more elegant suit of pale gray. "From the King Father's own tailor," he explained. "Is she kind?" I asked as he adjusted the fit of the jacket. "The Queen, I mean." Marcus's hands paused for a fraction of a second. "She is just," he said carefully. "Before the attack she often laughed. Now," he resumed his work, "she protects what is hers. That is what matters in a queen." It wasn't exactly the reassurance I had hoped for, but there was a loyalty in his defense that touched me. When he was finished, the mirror reflected a version of myself I barely recognized, still not handsome like Adrian, but somehow more solid, less like a shadow. The royal gardens were a sprawling expanse of interconnected spaces, ranging from formal rose gardens to more untamed woodland paths. I was led to a secluded corner where stone walkways wound between flowering shrubs and ancient trees, eventually opening into a small clearing with a fountain at its center. Serafina waited there, her wheelchair positioned beside a stone bench. She was not looking in my direction, but at the water, her profile sharp and clear against the backdrop of sunlit cascading droplets. There was a solitary stillness about her that made my heart ache. She sensed my approach before I made a sound, her head turning with a predator's swiftness. "Lord Julian," she greeted, her voice neutral but her eyes watchful. "You came." "You summoned me," I reminded her, approaching slowly. It would have been impolite to refuse. A hint of amusement flickered across her features. "Indeed. Please, sit." She gestured to the bench beside her. I sat on the cool stone, smoothing the fabric of my borrowed suit. Up close I could see the fine lines of tension around her eyes, the strain she carried in her powerful shoulders. Had she slept at all, or had she, like me, spent the night weighing unknown futures? "You have met my father," she stated. "Yes, he is direct." A short laugh escaped her. "A diplomatic assessment." Her fingers drummed once on the arm of her chair. "He says you might suffice." "High praise," I murmured, surprised by my own audacity. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but I caught the ghost of a smile. "From him?" "The very highest." She studied me for a long moment. "You know why you are here. It was not a question, but I answered it anyway. You are considering me for your consort." "Yes." No pretense, no gentle lead-in, just the stark truth laid between us like a challenge. The council requires that I take a human husband to maintain the alliance. I require that whoever I take does not grovel, or cower, or lie to my face. And you believe I meet these requirements? I believe you are the only candidate who might. She leaned forward slightly. Last night you said you did not see a monster. What do you see when you look at me, Julian? The question demanded honesty. I looked at her, really looked, taking in the proud set of her shoulders, the scar that marked her otherwise perfect features, the strength so evident in her hands, the intelligence in her gaze. But beyond these physical attributes, I sensed something else, a loneliness that echoed my own, a wounded pride, a desperate need to be seen as more than what her injuries had made her. "I see someone who has lost something precious," I said softly, "who hides her pain behind anger and distance. Someone powerful, yes, and dangerous, but not to those who are loyal." I hesitated, then added, "I see someone I could respect, and perhaps, in time, even care for." Something flared in her eyes, surprise, vulnerability, quickly suppressed by her usual control. "Fine words," she said, her tone dismissive, though her gaze remained intense. "But marriage to me will not be a fine thing. It will mean leaving your family, submitting to werewolf customs, being constantly watched and judged. The human husband of a werewolf queen is both a trophy and a target." "My family is not—" I stopped, wondering how to explain that leaving them would be no great loss. "My stepfather sees me as a liability. My own father is dead. My stepbrothers barely know me. I have nothing to lose." "Nothing?" she echoed, her voice dangerously soft. "What of your freedom, your dreams, the chance for a love match with some gentle human woman who could give you a normal life?" I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. What freedom? To be married off to whomever would have me? What dreams could I possibly achieve as an unwanted poor relation? And love? This time I did laugh, the sound brittle even to my own ears. "No one has ever looked at me and seen someone worth loving. At least with you the arrangement would be honest." Her expression changed then. Something fierce and almost protective flashed across her features. She reached out suddenly, her hand capturing mine. Her touch was warm, almost burning against my skin, her strength evident even in her careful grip. "Is that what you want, Julian? Honesty? Because honestly, I will never be the woman I was before. I will never walk beside you, never dance with you, never—" She broke off, her jaw tight with a surge of emotion. "But I will never lie to you, I will never abandon you, and I will never allow anyone to make you feel unwanted again." Her words struck me like a physical force, exposing needs I had buried so deep I had almost forgotten they existed. To be wanted, to belong somewhere, to matter to someone. "Yes," I whispered, my voice catching, "that is what I want." Her eyes held mine, searching for something, doubt perhaps, or deceit. Finding neither, she gave a single decisive nod. "Then be my consort, Julian Blackwell, rule by my side. Be my eyes and ears among the humans, my voice when mine becomes too harsh. In return, I offer you my protection, my position, and my unwavering loyalty." Her thumb brushed over my knuckles, a startlingly gentle gesture from such a powerful woman. "I cannot offer you love. I am not certain I remember how, but I can offer you respect, partnership, a purpose. It was more than anyone had ever offered me, more than I had ever dared to hope for. I accept," I said, the words sealing my fate like a spell cast into the space between us. Her hand tightened briefly around mine, then released it. "It is done, then." She straightened in her chair, once again every inch the Alpha Queen. "The formal announcement will be made this evening. The wedding will follow in 1 week. A week, 7 days to transition from unwanted stepson to werewolf consort." The reality of my agreement washed over me in a dizzying wave. "So soon?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the sudden panic in my chest. "The council has waited long enough," Serafina replied, her tone allowing no argument, "and a prolonged engagement would only invite complications." I understood her meaning. More time would mean more opportunity for those who opposed the match to interfere. I was no political prize, no strategic alliance, just a human boy of unremarkable lineage who, for reasons I still could not fathom, had captured the Alpha Queen's interest. "What happens now?" I asked, practical concerns rising through my shock. "You will be moved to the palace immediately," she said. "My father will oversee your preparation for the ceremony and your introduction to court life." Her expression softened fractionally. "You will have support, Julian. I will not leave you to navigate this alone." The gesture of reassurance, small as it was, steadied me. "And my step-family?" "They will be invited to the wedding, of course," she said, watching me carefully, "though their cooperation is irrelevant. Once you are under my protection, they hold no power over you." The thought was dizzying in its liberating potential. No more quiet belittling, no more being treated as an unwelcome burden, no more tiptoeing around my stepfather's moods. Freedom. Not the kind she had spoken of earlier, perhaps, but a kind of freedom nonetheless. "There is something else you should know," Serafina continued, her voice dropping lower. "The attack that paralyzed me was not random. There are those, both among werewolves and humans, who oppose the alliance. By accepting my proposal, you place yourself in their line of fire as well." "I understand," I said, though in truth the danger felt abstract compared to the immediate reality of this garden, this moment, this woman offering me an escape from the half-life I had been living. She studied me, then gave a single nod, seemingly satisfied with what she saw. "You should return to your home and gather any personal belongings you wish to bring. A royal escort will accompany you and bring you back to the palace before nightfall." It was all happening so fast. Yesterday I had been the invisible Julian, the unwanted stepson. Today I was to be announced as the future prince consort. My head spun with the sheer velocity of the change. As if sensing my overwhelm, Serafina reached out again, her fingers lightly touching my wrist. "One step at a time," she said, her voice gentler than I had yet heard it. "Tonight we make the announcement. Tomorrow we begin preparations. The rest will follow." I nodded, drawing strength from her steady presence. "I am ready." Her mouth curved into that not-quite smile. "We shall see." The return to my stepfather's house was surreal. Royal guards flanked me as I walked through the front door, their presence immediately throwing the household into a state of confusion. Servants scurried about, wide-eyed and whispering. My stepfather emerged from the parlor, his face a cycling progression of shock, disbelief, and avarice. "Julian, what is the meaning of this?" he demanded, eyeing the guards with thinly veiled apprehension. "I have come to collect my things," I said, my voice steadier than I had expected. "I will be residing at the palace from now on." "The palace?" He let out a brittle laugh. "For what reason?" "The Alpha Queen has chosen me as her consort," I said, the words still feeling foreign on my tongue. "We will be married in a week's time." The color drained from his face. "That is impossible. You must have misunderstood. Surely she meant—" "There is no misunderstanding, Lord Blackwell," interrupted one of the guards, his tone professionally detached. "By order of Queen Serafina, Lord Julian is to be escorted to the palace immediately after collecting his personal effects." My stepfather's mouth opened and closed several times before he regained his composure. "Well," he said finally, his voice now honeyed with a sudden false affection, "this is wonderful news. I always knew you had potential, Julian, my boy. What a blessing for our family." The abrupt change in his demeanor might have been amusing if it weren't so transparent. I simply nodded and moved past him toward the stairs, a guard at my heels. In my modest room I gathered the few possessions that held any real meaning for me. My father's watch, of course, a worn copy of folk tales he had read to me as a child, a small wooden box containing pressed flowers and river stones collected in happier times, and a few simple garments that were truly my own, not hand-me-downs from my stepbrothers. As I was folding a faded blue scarf my father had worn, Leo appeared in the doorway, his young face a mixture of awe and confusion. "Is it true?" he whispered, glancing nervously at the guard who had respectfully positioned himself outside my door. "Are you really going to marry the Alpha Queen?" I nodded, continuing to pack my meager belongings. "But what about Adrian?" he asked. "He was supposed to be presented." "Your brother's illness was a fortunate thing for him," I said quietly. "I do not think he would have fared well with the Queen." Leo bit his lip, looking unusually thoughtful for his 15 years. "Will you be happy, Julian? They say she is different now, dangerous." The genuine concern in his voice touched me. Of all my step-family, Leo had been the least unkind, too young to fully embrace his father's disdain for me. "I will be safe," I said, which was not quite an answer to his question. "And I will have a purpose." "Will you forget us?" he asked in a small voice. I paused in my packing, really looking at him, not just as Adrian's little brother or my stepfather's son, but as Leo himself, a boy on the cusp of manhood, uncertain of his place, seeking reassurance. "No," I said softly. "I will not forget you, Leo." I hesitated, then added, "Perhaps when you are a bit older, you might visit the palace." His face lit up. "Really? Father would never allow—" He stopped, realization dawning. "But he wouldn't be able to stop you now, would he?" "You'll be the prince consort." "Yes," I said, the word carrying a weight of authority I was only beginning to understand. "I will." I finished packing quickly after that, my few possessions fitting easily into a single trunk. As I descended the stairs, my stepfather waited in the foyer, his face now arranged in an expression of paternal pride. "Julian, my boy," he said loudly, clearly for the benefit of the guards, "we are all so proud. What an honor for our family." He embraced me stiffly, then whispered in my ear, "You will remember who helped raise you, won't you? The Queen will be generous with dowries for your stepbrothers, I am sure." I pulled away, meeting his calculating gaze. "I will remember everything," I said, my meaning made clear by the way his smile faltered. "Every kindness and every slight." His face hardened for a moment before he recovered his facade. "Of course, my boy, safe travels. We shall see you at the wedding." Outside, a royal carriage waited to take me back to the palace, to my new life. As we pulled away, I did not look back at the house that had never been a home. Instead, I looked ahead at the road winding toward the capital, toward the woman who had, in the space of a single day, completely upended the course of my existence. By the time I returned to the palace, the sun was beginning its descent, painting the stone walls in hues of gold and amber. I was led not to guest quarters, but to a suite in the royal wing, spacious rooms decorated in shades of blue and silver, with windows overlooking a different section of the gardens than I had seen earlier. "These will be your rooms until the wedding," explained Marcus, who had apparently been assigned as my personal valet. "The King Father thought you might appreciate some time to settle in before this evening's announcement." I wandered through the sitting room, bedchamber, and private bathing chamber, trying to absorb the reality that these opulent spaces were now mine. The bed alone was larger than my entire room at my stepfather's house, draped in silks finer than anything I had ever touched. "It is overwhelming," I admitted to Marcus as he unpacked my pathetic little trunk, my worn possessions looking shabby against the surrounding luxury. "You will adjust," he said with quiet confidence, hanging my faded tunics alongside several new suits that had mysteriously appeared in the wardrobe. "The palace seems intimidating at first, but it becomes home more quickly than one might think." Home. The word resonated within me, a longing never satisfied, a hope I had almost abandoned. "Now," Marcus continued briskly, "we should begin preparing for this evening. Lord Valerius selected this suit for your presentation. He indicated a stunning creation of deep blue silk and fine silver embroidery. He thought it would complement your coloring. The suit was more beautiful than anything I had ever worn, clearly made for someone of wealth and station, someone I had never been. As Marcus helped me dress, arranging my dark hair in a style that was elegant without feeling unnatural, I watched a stranger emerge in the mirror, a young man who looked almost regal, almost worthy of standing beside an alpha queen. A soft knock at the door announced the arrival of Lord Valerius. He entered with the fluid grace characteristic of werewolves, his keen gaze assessing me from head to toe. "Better," he pronounced, circling me slowly. "Not perfect, but we have little time. You must learn to move with more confidence, Julian. A consort never doubts his right to occupy a space." "I am not a consort yet," I reminded him. "But tonight all eyes will be watching to see if you could be." He adjusted the collar of my suit. "My daughter has made her choice. Now you must prove to the court that her judgment was sound." The weight of expectation pressed down on me. What if I cannot? What if I embarrass her? Lord Valerius's expression softened marginally. "You will not," he said with surprising certainty. "There is steel in you, boy. I saw it the moment we met. You merely need to allow others to see it as well." He stepped back, seemingly satisfied with my appearance. "Remember, you were chosen by the Alpha Queen herself. That alone grants you a status that no one can challenge." The reminder bolstered my courage. Whatever her reasons, Serafina had seen something in me worth claiming. I straightened my shoulders, lifting my chin as Lord Valerius had instructed. "Good," he approved. "Now come." "She is waiting." Serafina waited in an antechamber off the main ballroom, resplendent in formal attire of black and silver that emphasized her powerful build. When I entered, her gaze swept over me, lingering on my face rather than the fine suit. "You look," she began, then paused, searching for the right word. "Presentable," I supplied, echoing my stepfather's favorite backhanded compliment. A shadow of a smile touched her lips. I was going to say transformed, but not in the ways that matter. Her eyes held mine. "You still look at me directly. Good. Do not lose that quality, no matter what happens tonight." Lord Valerius cleared his throat. "The court is assembled. It is time." Serafina nodded, then gestured for me to approach. "Stand beside me," she instructed. "When I announce our engagement, place your hand on my shoulder. It is a traditional gesture among werewolves, an acceptance of the bond." I moved to her side, hyper-aware of the barely contained power emanating from her. Despite the wheelchair, she projected such authority that I felt small beside her, though I was not short for a human man. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice pitched for my ears alone. "No," I wanted to say. How could anyone be ready for such a monumental change? But looking into her eyes, those icy blue eyes that somehow burned with intensity, I found myself nodding. "Yes," I said, surprised to discover it was not entirely a lie. "I am ready." The doors to the grand ballroom swung open. Beyond them, hundreds of faces turned toward us, werewolves and humans alike. The nobility of both races gathered to witness the Alpha Queen's choice. The crowd parted as we entered, Serafina wheeling herself forward with dignified precision, me walking carefully at her side. Whispers erupted as we passed. I caught fragments. "Human boy, not even handsome. A political arrangement." I forced myself to keep my gaze forward, my expression composed as Lord Valerius had instructed. Beside me, Serafina's face was a mask of regal indifference, though I sensed the tension in the set of her shoulders. We reached the dais at the far end of the ballroom, where members of the royal council stood waiting. Their expressions ranged from carefully neutral to openly skeptical as they regarded me. Among them stood a tall, powerfully built she-wolf with russet hair and amber eyes that assessed me with undisguised disdain. "So this is your choice, cousin?" she asked, her voice carrying just far enough for those nearby to hear. "This human?" "Watch your tone, Sabina," Serafina replied, her voice deceptively soft but edged with warning. "You address your future prince consort." Sabina's lip curled slightly, but she offered a stiff bow. "Of course. My apologies. My queen." The subtle emphasis on the last words carried an undercurrent of challenge that made my skin prickle with unease. Serafina's expression remained impassive, but I sensed her awareness of the implied threat. The tension was broken as an elderly werewolf stepped forward, raising his hands for silence. The room immediately quieted, all eyes turning toward him. "Honored guests," he intoned. his voice surprisingly strong for one of his apparent age. "We are gathered to witness a momentous occasion. As is tradition, the Alpha Queen has selected a consort from among the human nobility, continuing the alliance that has brought peace to our lands for generations." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The old werewolf continued, "Queen Seraphina presents Lord Julian of the House of Blackwell as her chosen mate. The union will be sealed 1 week hence at the full moon ceremony." This was my cue. I placed my hand on Seraphina's shoulder as instructed, feeling the solid strength beneath the fine fabric of her jacket. Her own hand came up to cover mine briefly, an unscripted gesture that sent an unexpected warmth through me. "I accept this union," I said clearly, the traditional response Lord Valerius had taught me earlier, "and pledge my loyalty to the Alpha Queen and her pack." The words seemed to hang in the air for a moment before scattered applause broke out, gradually spreading until the entire ballroom echoed with it, though whether from genuine approval or mere protocol, I could not tell. Seraphina raised her hand, and silence fell once more. "Lord Julian will, from this moment forward, be accorded all the respect and protection due to my chosen consort," she declared, her tone making it clear this was not merely an announcement, but a command. "Any insult to him is an insult to me. Any threat to his safety will be answered with the full force of my authority." Her words carried such power that many in the crowd, werewolves included, lowered their eyes instinctively. I remained standing tall beside her, acutely aware of the statement she was making. I had been elevated not just to the position of future consort, but to someone under her personal formidable protection. "Let the celebration begin," announced the elderly council member, breaking the tension that had followed Seraphina's declaration. Music swelled from an unseen orchestra, and servants appeared with trays of wine and delicacies. The formal portion of the evening complete, the gathering shifted into a celebratory mode, though I noted many guests continued to cast curious or speculative glances our way. Seraphina turned to me, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. "You did well," she said, her approval warming me more than it should have. "Now comes the difficult part, meeting your new subjects." Over the next several hours, I was introduced to a dizzying array of nobility from both races. Werewolf aristocrats evaluated me with undisguised curiosity, while human nobles regarded me with emotions ranging from envy to pity. I struggled to remember names and titles, to maintain the poise Lord Valerius had emphasized, to speak neither too much nor too little. Throughout it all, Seraphina remained by my side, her steady presence an anchor in the swirling social currents. When I faltered over a particularly complex werewolf naming custom, she smoothly intervened. When a haughty werewolf countess made a thinly veiled comment about my modest background, her glacial stare silenced the woman immediately. "You are tired," she observed during a brief lull in the introductions. It was not a question. "I am managing," I replied, though in truth exhaustion was beginning to cloud my thoughts after the emotional tumult of the day. "Enough for tonight," she decided. "You need rest." Before I could protest, she signaled to Lord Valerius, who materialized at my side with remarkable swiftness. "Take him to his chambers," Seraphina instructed her father. "The court has seen enough for one evening." Lord Valerius nodded, then offered me his arm, a gesture of support disguised as protocol. "Come, my boy, tomorrow will bring new challenges." As I turned to follow him, Seraphina caught my wrist, her touch sending that now familiar warmth cascading through me. "Julian," she said, her voice pitched for my ears alone, "you honored our agreement tonight. I will not forget it." The simple acknowledgment steadied me more than any elaborate praise could have. I gave a single nod, a silent confirmation of our understanding, before allowing Lord Valerius to lead me from the ballroom. In the relative quiet of the corridor he glanced at me appraisingly. "You surpassed expectations," he said, his tone suggesting this was no small feat. "The court will talk, of course, they always do, but you have given them less ammunition than they hoped for." "Sabina seemed displeased," I ventured, remembering the hostile amber eyes. Lord Valerius's expression hardened. "My niece has always coveted what belongs to Seraphina. She believes that with my daughter's condition, the throne should pass to her." His voice lowered. "Be careful around her, Julian. Sabina is dangerous in ways even Seraphina may underestimate." The warning sent a chill through me, but exhaustion prevented me from fully processing its implications. By the time we reached my chambers, I could barely keep my eyes open. Marcus helped me out of the elaborate suit and into a soft nightshirt, then drew the heavy curtains against the moonlight. "Rest well, my lord," he said, a new deference in his tone. "Tomorrow the real preparation begins." Alone at last, I sank onto the enormous bed, too tired even to marvel at its luxury. As sleep claimed me, my last conscious thought was of Seraphina's face, not the mask of the Alpha Queen she showed her court, but the glimpses of the woman beneath, watchful, wounded, and far more complex than the monster of rumor. Morning came with startling abruptness as Marcus threw open the heavy curtains, flooding the chamber with golden light. "Time to rise, my lord," he announced cheerfully. "Lord Valerius has arranged for tutors to begin your instruction immediately after breakfast." I blinked groggily, the events of the previous day rushing back like a tide, the engagement, the announcement, the court's scrutiny. "Tutors? You have much to learn before the wedding," Marcus explained, laying out a simple but elegant day suit of pale gray. "Werewolf customs, court protocol, the lineage of noble houses. Lord Valerius was quite specific about the curriculum. 6 days. 6 days to transform from Julian, the unwanted stepson, to Julian, the prince consort." The enormity of the task made my head spin. "Will I see the queen today?" I asked, surprised by how much the answer mattered to me. Marcus's expression softened. "She holds court this morning, but has requested your presence for a private lunch." He helped me into the suit, his nimble fingers making quick work of the small buttons. "There is talk among the servants, you know." "What kind of talk?" I asked, tensing. "Good talk," he assured me. "The queen has been different since your arrival, more engaged. Before you came, she would sometimes go days without leaving her private chambers, seeing only her most trusted advisers. But yesterday she spent hours in the gardens after your meeting, and this morning she was already in her study at dawn." He smiled shyly. "They say you have awakened something in her." His words stirred a strange mix of emotions in me, pleasure at the thought I might have reached something in Seraphina, and anxiety at the responsibility such an influence implied. Before I could respond, a brisk knock announced the arrival of Lord Valerius. "Good, you are awake," he said, sweeping into the room with his characteristic grace. "We have much to accomplish today." He assessed my appearance with a critical eye, making minor adjustments to my hair and posture. "Better than yesterday, but still too hesitant. A prince consort does not request space. He commands it." "I have had little practice commanding anything," I reminded him. A hint of amusement flickered across his features. "Then consider today your first lesson." The morning passed in a blur of instruction. I was shuttled between tutors who drilled me on everything from the correct forms of address for various ranks of werewolf nobility to the complex history of the alliance between our races. My head throbbed with the effort of absorbing so much information so quickly. "The treaty was signed 248 years ago, following the Blood Moon War," intoned a scholarly werewolf with spectacles perched on his narrow nose. "The key provision requires an intermarriage between the royal werewolf line and a human noble family in each generation, symbolizing the bond between our peoples." "What happens if the provision is not fulfilled?" I asked. The scholar hesitated, exchanging a glance with Lord Valerius, who had been observing my lessons. "The treaty becomes void," Valerius answered when the scholar did not. "The protections it guarantees for both sides would dissolve." Understanding dawned. "That is why the council was so insistent that Seraphina take a husband. It is not just about an heir. It is about maintaining the peace." "Precisely," Lord Valerius confirmed. "After the attack that left her paralyzed, many feared she would refuse to fulfill her duty, that she would let her bitterness poison not just her life, but the alliance itself." The weight of responsibility settled more heavily on my shoulders. This was not just about my future, or even Seraphina's. It was about the stability of 2 entire peoples. By midday, my mind was saturated with new information, and I welcomed the break when Marcus came to escort me to my lunch with the Queen. He led me through corridors I had not seen before, eventually arriving at a sunny chamber with large windows overlooking a different section of the gardens. Seraphina was already there, examining documents spread across a table. She looked up as I entered, her expression warming fractionally from its usual stern mask. "Julian," she greeted, setting aside her work. "I hope my father has not exhausted you already." "Not quite," I replied, taking the seat a servant held out for me, though I never realized how little I knew about werewolf customs. "Most humans do not," she said, watching as servants placed dishes on the table before discreetly withdrawing. "It is safer that way, for them." I tilted my head questioningly, and she continued, "Knowledge brings responsibility. The more you understand about werewolves, the more accountable you become for navigating our rules correctly." "Then I should learn as much as possible," I said, helping myself to a small portion of the fragrant food, "especially if I am to be your consort." Something like approval flickered in her eyes. "You are not afraid of the challenge?" It was not a question, but I answered anyway. "I am terrified," I admitted frankly. "But fear has never been a useful excuse for inaction." She laughed then, a short, surprised sound that transformed her face, making her appear younger, almost boyish. "You continue to surprise me, Julian Blackwell." "Is that a good thing?" "It is. Refreshing." She gestured toward my plate. "Eat. We have matters to discuss." As we ate, she outlined what the coming days would entail: more lessons, fittings for my wedding attire, introductions to key members of the court, and preparations for the ceremony itself. "The wedding is a political necessity," she explained, her tone matter-of-fact, "but what follows is of greater significance." "The bonding," I said, recalling my morning lessons. "The werewolf ritual that connects mates." She nodded, her expression turning grave. "It is normally a simple process, an exchange of blood, a mingling of energies, but between a werewolf and a human—" She hesitated. "It is more complex, more dangerous." "Dangerous how?" I asked, setting down my fork. "Human bodies are not designed to withstand the power of the bond," she said carefully. "There have been incidents, deaths. The food turned to ash in my mouth. You did not mention this risk before. Would it have changed your decision?" she countered, her eyes intent on mine. I considered the question honestly. Would knowledge of this risk have sent me fleeing back to my stepfather's house, to a life of quiet degradation and eventual obscurity, or worse, to a loveless marriage with whatever woman would accept a plain, bookish man? "No," I said finally, "it would not have changed my answer." Something that might have been relief crossed her features. "The royal physicians have been working on adaptations to the ritual, ways to minimize the danger. But I wanted you to understand that this is not merely political theater. It is a genuine merging of our lives. The implications hung between us. This was not just a convenient arrangement, but something permanent, irrevocable, a true binding of my life to hers." "If the bond takes," I asked, voicing the question that had been forming in my mind, "will I change, become more like a werewolf?" "Not physically," she assured me. "You will not shift forms or suddenly develop enhanced strength, but you may experience echoes, sharper senses, a deeper intuition, a connection to me that transcends ordinary understanding. The possibility should have frightened me more than it did. Instead, I felt a strange sense of anticipation, as if some part of me recognized and welcomed this potential transformation." "There is something else you should know," Serafina continued, her gaze dropping briefly to the wheels of her chair before returning to my face. "My injuries. They affect more than my ability to walk. The bond requires both a physical and a spiritual connection. In my condition—" Understanding dawned. "You are concerned the bond will not form completely." "It is a possibility we must consider," she acknowledged, her voice tightly controlled. "And Victor would be next in line," I guessed, remembering Lord Valerius's warning. Serafina's expression hardened. "Yes, my cousin has never hidden her ambition. With me diminished, as she sees it, her claim grows stronger." "What happens if the bond fails?" I asked quietly. "We proceed as planned," she said firmly. "I remain queen. You remain my consort. We find other ways to secure the succession." Her hand tightened on the arm of her wheelchair. "I will not allow my injuries to become a weapon Sabina can use against our rule." Our rule. The words resonated within me, acknowledging a partnership I had not fully grasped until that moment. This was not simply about me becoming Serafina's consort. It was about us ruling together, facing threats together. "Then we will make it work," I said, reaching across the table to touch her hand, a bold gesture I would not have dared the day before. Bond or no bond. Her fingers turned, capturing mine in a warm grip that sent that now familiar heat cascading through me. "You have courage, Julian," she said softly, "more than you realize." The moment stretched between us, charged with something I was not yet ready to name. Then she released my hand, resuming her more formal demeanor. "There is one more matter to address," she said. "Your step-family." I stiffened slightly. "What about them?" "They have requested a private audience, ostensibly to congratulate you on your engagement." "And actually?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "To secure advantages from their new connection to the crown," she said, confirming my suspicion. "I have granted the audience for this afternoon. You do not have to attend if you do not wish to." The offer of protection was tempting. Part of me, the wounded, habitually overlooked part, wanted to hide behind Serafina's authority, to let her shield me from my stepfather's manipulations. But another part, the part that had looked directly into an alpha queen's eyes when all others had looked away, rejected the easy escape. I will be there, I decided. They are part of my past. I should face them as part of my future. She studied me for a moment, then gave a single nod. "As you wish. I will have Marcus escort you to the small audience chamber when they arrive." True to her word, Marcus appeared at my chambers after my afternoon lessons, informing me that my step-family awaited in the royal reception room. He helped me change into a more formal suit of dark blue, to project confidence, he advised, and arrange my hair in a style that emphasized the clean lines of my face. "Remember," he said as we walked toward the audience chamber, "you outrank them now. You do not need to defer to your stepfather any more." The reminder straightened my spine and lifted my chin as I entered the reception room. My stepfather and both my stepbrothers waited there, Adrian apparently having recovered enough from his illness to make the journey. Their expressions as I entered were a study in conflicting emotions. My stepfather's calculated obsequiousness, Adrian's barely concealed resentment, and Leo's genuine, if confused, happiness. "Julian, my boy," my stepfather gushed, rushing forward as if to embrace me before stopping at a respectful distance, uncertain of the new protocols. "You look absolutely transformed. Royal life clearly agrees with you." "Thank you for coming," I said, my voice cooler than I had intended. "I trust your journey was comfortable." "Oh yes, quite. The royal carriage was most luxurious." He gestured to my stepbrothers. "Adrian has finally recovered from his unfortunate illness, and Leo has been beside himself with excitement to see you." Adrian bowed stiffly, his handsome features arranged in a polite mask that did not reach his eyes. "Congratulations on your engagement, Julian," he said, each word precisely enunciated. "What an unexpected honor for our family." The emphasis on unexpected carried all his disbelief and resentment. How could plain, awkward Julian have secured the match that was meant for him? The question hung unspoken between us. Leo, less practiced in social duplicity, simply rushed forward to hug me. "I cannot believe it," he exclaimed. "You are going to be the prince consort." I returned his embrace, finding comfort in his unfeigned enthusiasm. "It has been quite a surprise for me as well," I admitted, smiling genuinely for the first time since entering. "We have been making preparations for the wedding, of course," my stepfather interjected, clearly eager to establish his family's importance in the proceedings. "Adrian has been helping me select appropriate attire for such a prestigious occasion." "The palace has arranged everything," I said, watching his face fall slightly at the implication that his involvement was unnecessary. "But I am pleased you will attend." Of course," he hurried on. "And afterward, well, we were hoping to discuss certain matters. The connection between our families now presents opportunities that—" The door opened behind me, cutting off his transparent maneuvering. Serafina entered, her wheelchair making a soft sound against the polished floor. The effect on my step-family was immediate and dramatic. My stepfather paled, Adrian's eyes widened in alarm, and even Leo stepped back instinctively. "Your Majesty," my stepfather stammered, dropping into a deep bow that his sons hastily mimicked. What an unexpected honor! Serafina positioned herself beside me, her presence a solid warmth at my side. "I wanted to personally welcome my future in-laws," she said, her tone deceptively mild. "Julian has spoken of you." The slight emphasis on spoken sent a visible tremor through my stepfather. What had I told her? What might I yet reveal? The questions were clear in his suddenly anxious expression. "You have raised an exceptional young man," Serafina continued, her hand coming to rest lightly on my arm, a gesture of possession and protection that did not escape anyone's notice. "We did our best," my stepfather managed weakly. "Julian has always been unique." "Indeed." Her smile did not reach her eyes. "And now he will be a prince. Life takes unexpected turns, does it not, Lord Blackwell?" My stepfather swallowed hard. "Indeed, Your Majesty." "I understand you wish to discuss opportunities," she continued smoothly. "Perhaps you could elaborate." Trapped, my stepfather floundered for a diplomatic approach. "Merely family matters. Adrian's coming debut, Leo's education, nothing that need concern Your Majesty." "Everything concerning Julian's family concerns me now," she countered, her grip on my arm tightening fractionally. "But I am sure the royal treasurer can address any financial considerations. As for the young lord's futures," she glanced at my stepbrothers, her gaze lingering thoughtfully on Leo, "the palace is always in need of suitable companions for the prince consort. Perhaps when he is older, the younger Lord Blackwell might be considered for such a position. If Julian approves, of course." Leo's face lit up at the prospect, while my stepfather calculated the advantage of having a son placed so close to power. "How generous, Your Majesty." "Julian inspires generosity," she replied, her eyes meeting mine briefly, something almost tender in their depths. Then her expression hardened as she turned back to my stepfather. "He also inspires loyalty. I trust his family will demonstrate that quality unfailingly in the future." The warning could not have been clearer. My stepfather bobbed another bow. "Of course, Your Majesty. Our devotion to Julian has always been—" "Let us not strain credibility, Lord Blackwell," Serafina interrupted, her voice dropping to a dangerous softness. "The past is written. What matters now is how you conduct yourself going forward." A heavy silence fell, broken only when I placed my hand gently on Serafina's arm. "Perhaps we should allow my family to refresh themselves before dinner," I suggested, offering a graceful exit from the increasingly tense exchange. "They have had a long journey." Serafina studied me for a moment, then inclined her head in acquiescence. "As you wish." She turned back to my stepfamily. "Servants will show you to your accommodations. You will dine with the court this evening." After they had been escorted out, Serafina remained beside me, watching my face carefully. "Are you all right?" The genuine concern in her voice touched me deeply. "Yes," I said, surprised to find it true. Seeing them now, after everything that has happened, they seem smaller somehow, less intimidating. "Power has that effect," she observed. "It changes how you see others and how they see you." "Is that why you came?" I asked. "To show them your power?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I came to show them your power, Julian, to make it clear that any disrespect towards you would have consequences." "You were protecting me," I said, a warm feeling unfurling in my chest. "Yes," she acknowledged simply, "and I always will." The promise lingered between us as she took her leave, her hand brushing mine briefly, a touch that seemed increasingly deliberate, increasingly meaningful. I watched her go, aware of a shifting within me, a realignment of how I viewed not just my stepfamily, but myself. Julian, the unwanted stepson, was fading. In his place was emerging someone newer, stronger, someone who might in time be worthy of the title of prince. The days that followed passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Each morning brought new lessons in werewolf customs and court protocol. Each afternoon, fittings for my wedding attire or introductions to important nobles. Each evening, formal dinners where I was displayed beside Serafina like a new and curious acquisition. Throughout it all, I found myself increasingly drawn to the woman behind the Alpha Queen's formidable facade. In quiet moments, a private lunch in the gardens, a brief conversation in the library, glimpses of Serafina herself emerged. Her dry wit, her surprising knowledge of human literature, her passionate commitment to her people's welfare. I learned that before her injury, she had been an avid explorer of the wild territories beyond the kingdom's borders, that she still woke before dawn each day to train her upper body, refusing to surrender completely to her limitations, that her favorite color was not the royal black and silver, but the deep green of the ancient forests. Small details, perhaps, but each one added dimension to the woman I was pledged to marry, transforming her from a strategic alliance into a person I found myself genuinely curious about, perhaps even beginning to care for. On the eve of our wedding, I stood on the balcony of my chambers, watching the full moon rise, silver bright, above the palace gardens. Tomorrow I would become a prince. Tomorrow I would bind my life to Serafina's in ways I still could not fully comprehend. A soft knock at my door broke my reverie. Expecting Marcus with some last-minute instructions, I called permission to enter. Instead, Serafina herself wheeled into my chambers, her presence unexpected and strangely intimate in these private rooms. "I hope I am not intruding," she said, pausing just inside the door. "No," I assured her, moving from the balcony to meet her. "Is something wrong?" "No." She seemed uncharacteristically hesitant. "I wanted to give you something, before tomorrow makes everything official." From inside her jacket she withdrew a small box of dark wood, intricately carved with symbols I recognized from my lessons, ancient werewolf runes representing protection and loyalty. "This belonged to my grandmother," she explained, holding it out to me. "A human, like you, who married an Alpha King in a time of even greater tension between our peoples. She wore it on the day of her bonding." I accepted the box with trembling hands, opening it carefully to reveal a delicate silver amulet set with a moonstone that seemed to glow with its own inner light. "It is beautiful," I whispered, touching the cool stone reverently. "The stones are said to ease the transition during the bonding," she said, watching my face closely, "to help the human partner withstand the surge of power." She paused, then added quietly, "I want you to have every protection possible." The gesture moved me deeply, not just the valuable gift itself, but the thought behind it, the concern for my well-being it represented. "Thank you," I said, looking up to find her eyes intent on mine. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the amulet. I nodded and she moved closer, her fingers warm against my skin as she fastened the delicate clasp around my neck. The touch lingered longer than strictly necessary. The moonstone seemed to pulse once against my chest, as if recognizing something in my blood, before settling into a subtle glow. "It suits you," she said, her voice dropping to a lower register that sent a shiver through me. "As if it was waiting for you." Our eyes met, and something shifted in the space between us, a recognition, a possibility, a future not merely to be endured, but perhaps to be embraced. Her hand still rested on my shoulder, her thumb tracing small circles on my collarbone that sent tingles through my body. "Serafina," I began, not sure what I meant to say, but needing to give voice to the emotions swirling within me. "Tomorrow," she said softly, letting her hand fall with what seemed like reluctance. "After tomorrow, there will be time for everything else." She backed her chair away slightly, creating distance between us. "Sleep well, Julian. Dream of better days to come." With those words she left as unexpectedly as she had arrived, leaving me standing in the center of my chambers, the moonstone amulet cool against my skin, my heart beating a new, uncertain rhythm that felt dangerously like hope. Morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through windows that servants had already thrown open. Today was my wedding day. The thought settled strangely in my mind, both surreal and undeniable. Marcus arrived with a team of attendants, their arms laden with everything needed to transform me into a royal consort. "The King Father sent these," he explained, gesturing to two older werewolf men who carried an ornate silver box. "Traditional adornments for an alpha's mate. The preparations were elaborate. First, a bath scented with herbs I did not recognize. To purify the body, one attendant explained. Then a meticulous grooming of my dark hair, each strand arranged in a style that was both elegant and masculine. The suit was specially designed, Marcus said, reverently removing it from a cedar chest. Silver for the moon, blue for human nobility, and white for new beginnings. It was the most beautiful garment I had ever seen, layers of flowing fabric that seemed to shimmer between colors with each movement, detailed with subtle embroidery depicting the history of the alliance between werewolves and humans. When they helped me into it, the fabric settled against my skin like cool water, surprisingly light despite its elaborate appearance. Lord Valerius arrived as the final preparations were being completed. He dismissed the other attendants with a gesture, then circled me slowly, evaluating the transformation with his keen gaze. "You look like a prince," he said finally, genuine approval in his voice. "Serafina will be pleased." The mention of her name sent a flutter through my stomach. Nervousness, anticipation, and something deeper I was not quite ready to examine. "How is she this morning?" A shadow of concern crossed his features. determined. The ceremony will not be easy for her. Her pride—" He trailed off, then straightened his shoulders. "But she has endured worse, and your presence seems to strengthen her." His words warmed me even as they underscored the challenges that lay ahead. This day was about politics and alliance, yes, but also about two people, one broken in body, one broken in spirit, finding an unexpected connection. "I have something for you," Lord Valerius said, producing a small silver dagger with a hilt of polished moonstone that matched my amulet. "This will be used in the bonding ritual." He held it out, handle first. "You should carry it until then." I accepted the weapon, surprised by its weight. "I have never carried a blade before." "There are many things you will do as a prince that you have never done before," he replied pragmatically. "The key is to do them with confidence." He helped me secure the dagger in a concealed sheath within the folds of my suit. "Remember, when the time comes, a single drop of blood is all that is required. The magic does the rest." The magic. Despite days of lessons about werewolf customs, the supernatural elements of what lay ahead remained a mystery to me. How would it feel to be bonded to another being? Would I sense Seraphina's thoughts, feel her emotions? Or would the bond fail to form properly, as she feared? "It is time," Lord Valerius announced, breaking my reverie. "Are you ready?" No, I was not ready. How could anyone be ready for such a transformation? But I nodded anyway, squaring my shoulders as I had been taught. "Yes, I am ready." The ceremony took place in the ancient stone circle at the heart of the palace grounds, a sacred space where werewolves had conducted important rituals for generations. As I was led along a path strewn with silver leaves, I saw hundreds of guests already assembled, werewolf nobility in formal attire, human aristocrats in their finest, all watching with unabashed curiosity as I approached. My stepfather and stepbrothers stood among the human contingent, their expressions a study in conflicting emotions. My stepfather's calculating gaze darted between me and the assembled werewolf lords, no doubt assessing potential advantages. Adrian's face was a mask of practiced politeness that did not quite hide his resentment. Only Leo's smile seemed genuine, his eyes wide with wonder at the spectacle. At the center of the stone circle waited Seraphina. She had eschewed her usual wheelchair for a specially designed seat of silver and black wood that resembled a throne, allowing her to maintain her dignity during the ceremony. Even seated, she commanded attention, her powerful presence drawing all eyes. Her formal attire of deepest black accented with silver made her pale skin and blue eyes seem to glow in contrast. Those eyes found mine as I entered the circle, and everything else, the murmuring crowd, my stepfamily's scrutiny, the weight of protocol, fell away. In that moment, we were just Seraphina and Julian, two wounded souls reaching towards something neither had expected to find. The elderly werewolf I recognized from the engagement announcement stepped forward to conduct the ceremony, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed gathering. The words were both familiar and strange, elements of traditional human marriage vows interwoven with older, wilder promises from werewolf custom. "Do you, Seraphina, Alpha Queen of the Northern Territories, accept this human man as your consort, your prince, and your partner in rule? Do you pledge to protect him, to respect his counsel, and to bind your life force to his in the ancient way?" "I do," Seraphina replied, her voice strong and clear, her eyes never leaving mine. "And do you, Julian Blackwell, accept this alpha werewolf as your mate, your queen, and your partner in life? Do you pledge to stand beside her, to strengthen her rule, and to accept the bond that will join your spirits?" "I do," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. The elder nodded in solemn approval, then raised his hands. "Then let the binding begin." Lord Valerius stepped forward, bringing a chalice of hammered silver. "The mixing of blood," he announced, "the oldest magic known to our kind." This was the moment I had been prepared for. I reached for the concealed dagger, drawing it from its sheath with hands that trembled only slightly. Seraphina extended her hand, palm up, a silent invitation. Following the protocol I had been taught, I pressed the tip of the blade to my own palm first, allowing a single drop of blood to fall into the chalice. Then, with the utmost care, I did the same to her outstretched palm, our blood mingling in the silver vessel. The elder took the chalice, intoning words in the ancient language of werewolves. Sounds more like growls and howls than human speech. Then he raised it toward the sun, which had reached its zenith directly overhead. "Drink," he instructed, offering the chalice first to Seraphina, then to me. The liquid burned like fire as it passed my lips. Not painful exactly, but intensely, alarmingly alive. Heat spread from my throat through my limbs, gathering strangely around my heart. I gasped, swaying slightly as the sensation intensified. "Steady," Seraphina murmured, reaching for my hand. Her touch anchored me as the burning grew, becoming a pulse, a rhythm that seemed to echo between us. The elder began another incantation, this one accompanied by movements of his gnarled hands, tracing patterns in the air between Seraphina and me. With each gesture, the connection between us seemed to strengthen, the pulse synchronizing until I could not tell if it was her heartbeat I felt, or my own. Then suddenly, resistance. Like hitting a wall in what should have been an open doorway, the pulse faltered, stuttered. Seraphina's grip on my hand tightened painfully, her face contorting with effort or pain, I could not tell which. The elder's chanting grew more urgent, his gestures more emphatic. "The bond resists," Lord Valerius murmured from somewhere beside me, concern evident in his voice. "Her injury." Panic flared within me. If the bonding failed, everything we had worked toward would be compromised. The alliance, Seraphina's rule, our future. Instinctively I reached for the moonstone amulet on my chest, drawing strength from its cool weight against my skin. As my fingers touched the stone, it flared with a sudden brilliance, illuminating the space between Seraphina and me with a silvery light. The barrier I had sensed seemed to waver, to thin. "Julian." Seraphina's voice reached me, strained but determined. "Look at me." I met her gaze, finding her eyes had changed. The blue was now ringed with silver, her pupils dilated with the effort of the partial transformation her human form allowed. In them I saw pain, yes, but also a fierce determination, and something else, something that looked startlingly like tenderness. "Let me in," she whispered, the words meant for me alone, despite the crowd surrounding us. "Trust me." And I did. I had no idea how to manipulate the strange energy flowing between us, but I stopped fighting it, stopped fearing it. Instead, I imagined opening myself to it, to her, not just my mind, but the core of who I was, with all my doubts and hopes and newly awakening feelings. The barrier shattered. Power surged through the connection, no longer blocked but flowing freely between us. Seraphina's presence flooded into me, not thoughts exactly, but emotions, sensations, the very essence of her, strength and pain, loneliness and pride, and beneath it all an unexpected tenderness that took my breath away. The elder's voice rose to a triumphant crescendo. "The bond is formed, alpha and mate, joined in body and spirit." A roar went up from the werewolf contingent, a primal sound of approval that vibrated through the stone circle. The human guests applauded more decorously, though many looked faintly disturbed by the display of supernatural power they had just witnessed. Through it all, Seraphina's hand remained clasped in mine, our newly formed bond humming between us like a plucked string. I could feel her satisfaction, her relief, and beneath it, an ache of vulnerability that she would never have revealed willingly. "You feel it?" Her voice sounded in my mind, surprise and wonder coloring the thought. "Yes," I replied, not speaking aloud but somehow knowing she would hear me. "I feel you." The ceremony concluded with more traditional elements, an exchange of rings, pronouncements of our union, formal acknowledgments of my new status as prince consort. But these seemed almost perfunctory after the intensity of the bonding. When Seraphina finally pulled me toward her for the ritual kiss that sealed our marriage, the touch of her lips against mine sent a cascade of sensations through our newly formed connection, heat and hunger, and a promise that left me dizzy. "My prince," she murmured against my lips, the words carrying a depth of meaning beyond the formal title. The celebration that followed was a blur of congratulations, formal dances, which Seraphina observed from her throne-like chair, her eyes never leaving me, and an elaborate feast that stretched well into the evening. Throughout it all, I remained acutely aware of Seraphina's presence, not just physically, but through our bond, a warm, steady connection that allowed me to sense her location and her general emotional state, even when we were separated by the crowded ballroom. It was only late in the evening, as the festivities continued without us, that we were finally escorted to the royal chambers, rooms I had never seen before, connected to Serafina's private suite by an adjoining door. "These are your formal quarters," Lord Valerius explained as servants bustled about, arranging my few possessions among the luxurious furnishings. "You may of course share the Queen's chambers as well, but tradition dictates that the Prince Consort maintain his own space." The implication was clear. While our marriage needed to be consummated to fully validate our union, werewolf custom acknowledged the complexity of such relationships, especially between different species. I would have my privacy when I needed it. When the servants had finally withdrawn, leaving me alone in the opulent suite, I stood uncertainly in the center of the room. The bond told me that Serafina waited nearby, her emotions a complex tangle I could not yet fully interpret. Custom dictated that I should go to her, but suddenly all my newfound courage faltered. What did I know of being a husband, let alone to a werewolf queen? What if my inexperience disappointed her? What if the limitations of her injury made intimacy a source of frustration rather than connection? A soft knock at the adjoining door interrupted my spiraling thoughts. "Julian?" Serafina's voice came through the wood. "May I enter?" "Yes," I called, smoothing my wedding suit with nervous hands. The door opened to reveal Serafina, still in her formal attire, though she had shed the ceremonial outer robe. She had returned to her usual wheelchair, which she maneuvered into my chambers with practiced ease. "You are anxious," she observed, and I realized she could sense my emotions just as I could hers. "The bond will take some getting used to." "It is not that," I said, honesty seeming the only viable path. "It is what comes next." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "Ah." She wheeled closer, stopping a respectful distance away. "Julian, nothing needs to happen tonight that you are not comfortable with. The bonding itself has secured our union in the eyes of werewolf law. The rest—" She hesitated. "The rest can wait until you are ready." Her consideration touched me deeply, especially as I could sense through our new connection that her own desires ran counter to the restraint she offered. "And if I am ready?" I asked softly. "Despite my inexperience?" Her eyes darkened, her pupils dilating slightly in a way I was beginning to recognize as a sign of her wolf stirring closer to the surface. "Then we would proceed carefully," she said, her voice dropping to a lower register that sent shivers along my spine, "with patience and consideration for both our unique circumstances." I took a step toward her, then another, closing the distance between us. "Show me," I whispered. What followed was a discovery of each other, of the possibilities our new bond created, of connections that transcended physical limitations. Through our link, Serafina could feel sensations beyond what her injured body allowed, while I experienced echoes of her wolf's heightened awareness. When we finally came together completely, the bond flared between us, multiplying every touch, every sensation, until it was impossible to tell where one of us ended and the other began. Afterward, lying beside her in the massive bed in her chambers, I traced the scars that mapped her torso, evidence of both the assassination attempt and earlier battles. "Can you feel this?" I asked, my fingers skimming along her side, where sensation began to fade. "Yes and no," she replied, watching me with hooded eyes. "Not physically, but through you, through the bond. It is remarkable." Her hand caught mine, bringing it to her lips. "You are remarkable," I smiled, still marveling at how comfortable I felt with her, how natural this intimacy had become in such a short time. "So this is what being married to a werewolf is like." A low laugh rumbled through her chest. "This is what being married to me is like," she corrected, "and I suspect it will continue to surprise us both." We lay in companionable silence for a time, the bond between us a gentle hum of contentment. Then Serafina spoke again, her tone shifting to something more serious. "There is something you should know, now that we are truly bonded." I propped myself up on one elbow to see her face better. "What is it?" "The assassination attempt," she began, her expression darkening with memory. "It was not random. I have had my suspicions for some time, but I needed to be certain before acting." Her hand tightened around mine. "It was Sabina, Julian, My own cousin orchestrated the attack. The revelation sent a chill through me. You are certain? Yes. Her jaw tightened. I have been gathering evidence quietly. She believed that with me crippled and unable to produce an heir, the council would eventually set me aside in her favor. A grim smile touched her lips. She did not anticipate you. What will you do? I asked, fear and determination mingling within me at the thought of the danger lurking so close. Now that our bond is secured, I will move against her, Seraphina said, her voice taking on the edge of the Alpha Queen. With you at my side, her primary argument against my rule is invalidated. The council will support us. She will fight back, I warned, remembering the cold calculation in Sabina's amber eyes. Yes, Seraphina agreed, which is why I need you to be careful, very careful. Until she is dealt with, you are in danger. I thought of my father's watch, of his final words to me. Sometimes the greatest freedom is found in choosing your own path. I had chosen this path, this woman, this life. I would not shrink from its challenges now. We are in danger, I corrected, laying my hand against her cheek, and we will face it together. She turned her face to press a kiss into my palm, her eyes gleaming with a fierce approval. Together, she agreed, pulling me closer. My prince, my mate, my Julian. As I settled against her, feeling the steady beat of her heart beneath my cheek, I marveled at the journey that had brought me here. 1 week ago, I had been the unwanted stepson, invisible and insignificant. Now I was a prince, bonded to a woman whose strength and vulnerability called to something deep within me, standing at the beginning of a life I could never have imagined. There would be challenges ahead, Sabina's treachery to confront, a court to navigate, an alliance to maintain. But for the first time in my life, I did not face the future alone. Through our bond, I could feel Seraphina's unwavering presence, her determination, and something newer, more tender, growing between us. Not quite love yet, perhaps, but its promising beginning. Outside our windows, the full moon bathed the royal gardens in a silver light, the same light that seemed to pulse gently in the moonstone amulet still circling my neck. A symbol of protection, Lord Valerius had called it, but it had become more than that, a bridge between worlds, between wolf and human, between past and future. I closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to savor this moment of peace before the battles to come. Seraphina, I whispered. Her fingers stroked gently through my hair. Thank you, I said softly, for seeing me when no one else did. Her arms tightened around me. I will always see you, Julian, she promised, the words resonating through our bond with absolute truth. Always, and in that promise lay everything I had ever wanted but never dared to hope for. Recognition, belonging, a purpose, a home, not in a place but in a person, in the paralyzed Alpha Queen who had, against all odds, become my mate, my partner, my future. The unwanted stepson had found his place at last. Nan 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 nan.